My parents made me delay my big day for my spoiled sister, so I took one bold step to stay on course and teach them a lasting lesson. I had spent 30 years learning to be invisible in my own family's story, until the day I decided to rewrite the entire script. My name is Victoria Lane, and at 30, I thought I had finally figured out how to navigate the complicated dynamics of being the forgotten daughter. As an interior architect, I had built a successful career designing beautiful spaces for other people's dreams, while quietly accepting that my own dreams would always come second to my younger sister Sophie's latest whim. Sophie was 26, and she had somehow managed to turn taking selfies into what our parents genuinely believed was a legitimate career path. Her Instagram feed was a masterpiece of manufactured perfection. Every photo strategically lit, every caption carefully crafted to maximize engagement, every outfit chosen to promote whatever brand had paid her that week. But it was her YouTube channel that really sent my parents into overdrive. They treated her content creation schedule like she was directing the next Marvel blockbuster, tiptoeing around the house during her filming days and rearranging family dinners to accommodate her posting deadlines. Our entire household operated on Sophie's standard time. Family conversations were interrupted if she needed to take a quick photo that inevitably turned into an hour-long production. Vacations were planned around her content calendar. Even grocery shopping became a strategic mission to stock up on aesthetically pleasing foods for her what I eat in a day videos. My mother had actually learned photography terminology just to help Sophie with her lighting setups, and my father subscribed to marketing newsletters to better understand her brand strategy. Meanwhile, I had mastered the art of celebrating in silence. When I got promoted to senior designer at my firm, I mentioned it briefly over dinner, only to have the conversation immediately shift to Sophie's latest brand partnership with a skincare company. When I completed a major renovation project that was featured in a local magazine, I didn't even bother bringing it up. I knew it would just become background noise to whatever collaboration Sophie was excited about that week. Even my engagement to James 8 months ago had been treated like a minor footnote in the ongoing saga of Sophie's rise to internet fame. James and I had been planning our wedding meticulously. Every detail was carefully chosen and booked, from the vintage venue downtown to the string quartet that would play during our ceremony. I had even created a Pinterest board with over 300 pins, spending countless evenings coordinating colors, flowers, and decorations. This was supposed to be my moment, my one day to be the center of attention in my own life. But I should have known better. The first sign of trouble came 3 weeks before our wedding date. I was at my parents' house, discussing final guest list details with my mother Linda, when Sophie burst through the front door with her usual dramatic flair. "Everyone needs to sit down right now," Sophie announced, her phone already positioned for what I assumed would be another impromptu live stream. "I have the most amazing news." My father Richard immediately dropped his newspaper and gave Sophie his full attention. The same attention I had been trying to capture for the past hour while discussing seating arrangements. "Derek proposed," Sophie squealed, flashing a ring that looked suspiciously similar to one I had seen her browsing online weeks earlier. "And we want to have our engagement party on March 15th. My heart stopped. March 15th was my wedding date. "Sweetheart, that's wonderful," my mother gushed, completely ignoring the fact that I was sitting right there with my wedding binder open on the table. "Tell us everything." I watched in growing disbelief as my parents fawned over Sophie's news, asking about the proposal details, the ring, and her plans for the engagement party. Not once did anyone acknowledge that March 15th was already taken. Finally, I cleared my throat. "Sophie, that's my wedding date." She looked at me with those wide, innocent eyes that had gotten her out of trouble countless times before. "Oh, is it? I totally forgot. But this is so last minute. And Derek's family can only do that weekend because of their business trip schedule." "Last minute?" I couldn't hide the edge in my voice. "I've been planning this for 8 months. The venue is booked, the invitations are sent, the catering is confirmed." My mother shot me a warning look. "Victoria, don't be dramatic. These things can be worked out." "Worked out how exactly?" "Well," my father chimed in, "engagement parties are more flexible than weddings. Maybe you could move your date to the following weekend?" I stared at him in disbelief. "You want me to change my wedding date so Sophie can have her engagement party?" "It's not just an engagement party," Sophie protested. "We're planning to live stream it for my channel. My followers have been asking about my love life for months, and this could be huge for my brand. The venue Derek chose has the perfect aesthetic for content creation. This is insane, I muttered. But I could already see the familiar pattern forming. Sophie needed something, and everyone else was expected to rearrange their lives to accommodate her. Victoria, please, my mother said in that tone she used whenever she wanted me to be the reasonable one. You know how important Sophie's career is right now. She's finally gaining real traction with sponsors. This could change everything for her. What about what this changes for me? The room fell silent. For a moment, I thought maybe they would finally understand how their constant prioritization of Sophie affected me. But then my father sighed heavily. Sweetheart, you're 30 years old. You and James are established in your careers, you have a stable relationship. Sophie is still building her life. Sometimes we need to help family members who are in more vulnerable positions. Vulnerable positions. That's what they called Sophie's influence career that paid for her designer handbags and weekly spa treatments. I sat there in stunned silence, my eyes moving slowly from one face to another. These three people who were supposed to love me most in the world, who should have been my biggest advocates and protectors. I kept waiting for someone, anyone, to pause and say, wait, this isn't right. Victoria has been planning this for months. I waited for my mother to remember how excited I had been when I first told her about our venue booking, or for my father to recall the proud smile on his face when James had asked for his blessing. I waited for someone to acknowledge that what they were asking me to do was not just inconvenient, but fundamentally wrong. But the acknowledgement never came. Sophie had already retreated into her digital world, her fingers flying across her phone screen as she undoubtedly crafted the perfect announcement post for her followers. I could practically see the caption forming in her mind, OMG guys, Derek proposed, planning the most amazing engagement party. Stay tuned for all the behind-the-scenes content. Meanwhile, my parents had seamlessly transitioned into full event planning mode for their precious youngest daughter, throwing around names of photographers and discussing whether the country club or the botanical gardens would provide better Instagram opportunities for Sophie's big day. They talked with the kind of animated enthusiasm they had never once shown for my wedding preparations, treating my 8 months of careful planning like it was nothing more than a minor scheduling hiccup that could be easily resolved with a phone call or two. Fine, I heard myself saying. I'll call the vendors and see what I can do. The relief on their faces was immediate and obvious. My mother actually smiled for the first time all evening. Oh, honey, thank you so much. I knew you'd understand. You're always so good about these things. Good about these things. Good about disappearing when Sophie needed the spotlight. Good about pretending it didn't hurt every single time. That night, I cried in James's arms as I explained what had happened. He was furious. More furious than I had ever seen him. This is completely insane, Victoria. You can't seriously be considering this. What choice do I have? If I don't move the date, they'll never forgive me. Sophie will make sure everyone knows I ruined her engagement party, and my parents will side with her like they always do. So let them be angry. This is our wedding, not a family negotiation, but James didn't understand what it was like to spend your entire life being the afterthought. He came from a family where his achievements were celebrated, where his needs mattered, where he had never had to compete for basic acknowledgement. I spent the next week making phone calls, begging vendors to accommodate a date change, losing deposits that couldn't be transferred, and watching my carefully planned dream wedding slowly fall apart. Some vendors couldn't move to the new date, forcing me to start over with different options that didn't match my vision. The breaking point came when I was at my Uncle Robert's house, my father's older brother who had always been the black sheep of the family. Uncle Robert lived in a beautiful colonial mansion on the outskirts of town, and unlike my parents, he had always treated me with genuine interest and respect. You look exhausted, kiddo, he said as I slumped into his leather armchair, surrounded by wedding planning papers that I was trying to reorganize for the third time. Just wedding stress, I lied. Uncle Robert raised an eyebrow. Wedding stress or family stress? I looked up at him sharply. What do you mean? Victoria, I've watched your family dynamics for 30 years. I know exactly what's happening here. Sophie decided she wanted your wedding date, and your parents are making you give it up, aren't they? The tears I had been holding back for weeks suddenly spilled over. I told him everything. The engagement announcement, the immediate assumption that I would accommodate Sophie's needs, the way my parents had framed it as me being selfish if I didn't comply. Uncle Robert listened without interrupting, his expression growing darker with each detail. "You know," he said finally, "this isn't the first time something like this has happened." "What do you mean?" "Your high school graduation party. Sophie had some modeling audition that same weekend, so your parents canceled your celebration and used the money to pay for her headshots and portfolio." I had forgotten about that, but as he mentioned it, the memory came flooding back. I had been so excited about my graduation party, especially since I was valedictorian and had earned a full scholarship to college, but Sophie's modeling dreams had taken priority as usual. "And your college graduation?" Uncle Robert continued. "Sophie had that art show opening that she insisted the whole family needed to attend. You ended up celebrating alone." I had forgotten about that too. That's the problem, Victoria. You've been trained to forget. You've been conditioned to believe that your achievements, your milestones, your happiness is less important than Sophie's latest project. Uncle Robert leaned forward, his expression serious. "But here's what you don't know. 2 months ago, Sophie called your mother asking about your wedding date. She specifically asked when it was, and what venue you had chosen. This wasn't a coincidence, kiddo. This was planned." I felt like the floor had dropped out from under me. "What are you saying?" "I'm saying Sophie deliberately chose your wedding date because she knew it would force you to move yours. She wanted the attention that comes with making her big sister sacrifice something important. It's all content for her, Victoria. Your pain is literally her brand." The rage that had been simmering under the surface for weeks suddenly exploded into something I had never felt before. It wasn't just anger, it was clarity. For the first time in my life, I could see the manipulation clearly, and I was done being a victim of it. "Uncle Robert," I said slowly, "would you be willing to help me with something?" He smiled, and I could see a hint of mischief in his eyes that reminded me why my parents had always considered him the troublemaker of the family. "What did you have in mind?" "I want to have my wedding on the original date, here, at your house. And I want to invite everyone." "Everyone?" "Everyone my parents have spent years looking down on, all the extended family they consider beneath them, all the cousins and aunts and uncles they only tolerate at mandatory gatherings, everyone they've excluded from their precious social circle because they're not successful enough or refined enough for their taste." Uncle Robert's smile grew wider. "Victoria, that is absolutely brilliant. And yes, I would be honored to host your wedding." For the next 2 weeks, I lived a double life. During the day, I continued the charade of planning my moved wedding date, letting my parents believe they had successfully manipulated me into compliance. But in my spare time, I was secretly planning the real celebration. Uncle Robert's house was perfect for a wedding. The expansive gardens, the grand staircase, the ballroom that hadn't been used in years but was absolutely stunning once we cleaned it up. More importantly, it was big enough to accommodate the guest list I was actually excited about. I called every family member my parents had spent years dismissing. Cousin Marie, who worked as a mechanic and had grease under her fingernails, but could make anyone laugh until they cried. Aunt Sarah, who had never married and lived with her cats, but who sent me handwritten letters every birthday. Uncle Jim, who drove a truck for a living and spoke with a thick accent that embarrassed my mother at family gatherings. One by one, they all said yes. More than that, they were excited. Many of them told me they had been hurt by years of being excluded from important family events, treated like they weren't good enough for my parents' standards. "Honey," Aunt Sarah said over the phone, "I have been waiting 30 years for someone in that family to remember that we exist. I wouldn't miss this for the world." The morning of March 15th arrived with perfect weather. I woke up in Uncle Robert's guest room, surrounded by the people who actually cared about me. James was getting ready in another part of the house, and I could hear the caterers setting up in the garden. My phone had been buzzing all morning with texts from my parents, asking about last-minute details for my rescheduled wedding that was supposed to happen the following weekend. I had been vague in my responses, letting them assume everything was on track. At 11 a.m., I sent a group text to my parents and Sophie. "Wedding starts at 2 p.m., 456 Elmwood Drive. Hope to see you there." My mother called immediately. "Victoria, what is this? Your wedding isn't until next weekend. And what's this address?" "Actually, Mom, my wedding is today. It was always today. I never changed the date. The silence on the other end of the phone lasted so long I thought the call had dropped. What do you mean you never changed the date? We've been planning Sophie's engagement party for today. I know. Sophie can still have her party. I'll be having my wedding. Victoria Lane, you cannot do this to your sister. I'm not doing anything to Sophie. I'm having my wedding on the date I originally planned, at a venue that can accommodate it, with people who actually want to celebrate with me. I hung up before she could respond. By 2 o'clock, Uncle Robert's house was filled with 87 guests. The extended family members my parents had spent years snubbing showed up in force, along with my college friends, work colleagues, and James's family. The atmosphere was joyful and authentic in a way I had never experienced at family gatherings dominated by my parents' social climbing and Sophie's attention-seeking. Cousin Marie had driven 12 hours from Michigan. Aunt Sarah brought homemade cookies that were shaped like wedding bells. Uncle Jim gave a toast that was so heartfelt and genuine that there wasn't a dry eye in the room. My parents arrived at 2:30, bringing Sophie and her fiancé Derek along with a camera crew she had hired to film her engagement party. They clearly expected to find a small, hastily thrown-together gathering that would be easily overshadowed by Sophie's event. Instead, they walked into a full-scale wedding celebration in progress. I was standing at the altar in my grandmother's restored wedding dress, which Uncle Robert had secretly preserved for years, waiting for me. James looked handsome in his tuxedo, and the string quartet was playing our chosen processional music. Flower petals were scattered along the aisle, and every seat was filled with people who were genuinely happy to be there. My mother's face went through a series of expressions: confusion, realization, and then fury. But it was too late to stop anything. The ceremony was already underway. Uncle Robert had agreed to officiate, having gotten ordained online specifically for this purpose. As he began to speak about love, commitment, and the importance of surrounding yourself with people who truly support your happiness, I could see my parents whispering angrily in the back row. Sophie was frantically trying to direct her camera crew, but they seemed confused about what they were supposed to be filming. The engagement party she had planned was supposed to be the main event, but instead they had walked into someone else's celebration. Do you, Victoria, take James to be your husband, promising to love and support him, to build a life together based on mutual respect and genuine partnership? I do. Do you, James, take Victoria to be your wife, promising to see her, celebrate her, and never ask her to make herself smaller so others can feel bigger? James smiled at me with tears in his eyes. I absolutely do. When Uncle Robert pronounced U.S. husband and wife, the entire room erupted in cheers. Cousin Marie let out a whistle that could probably be heard 3 blocks away. Aunt Sarah was openly sobbing with joy. Even some of my work colleagues were wiping their eyes. The only people not celebrating were my parents and Sophie, who stood in the back looking like they had been hit by a truck. During the reception, I watched Sophie attempt to salvage her engagement party by setting up impromptu photo opportunities around the edges of my wedding celebration. But her heart clearly wasn't in it, and her camera crew seemed more interested in filming the authentic joy of my reception than her staged content creation. My mother cornered me during the cake cutting. Victoria, I cannot believe you did this. You have humiliated Sophie and made a mockery of our family. I looked at her calmly, feeling more centered than I had in years. Mom, I had my wedding on the date I planned, with the people I wanted to celebrate with. The only person who has been humiliated is me. For 30 years, every time you prioritized Sophie's wants over my needs. That's not fair. We have always supported you. No, you've always expected me to support Sophie. There's a difference. Before she could respond, Uncle Robert appeared at my side. Linda, I think it's time you and Richard understood something. Victoria is not your family backup plan. She's not the daughter whose job it is to sacrifice her happiness so Sophie can have everything she wants. And if you can't see that after today, then you don't deserve to have her in your life at all. My mother's face flushed red, but for once, she didn't have a comeback. The rest of the reception was magical. We danced until nearly midnight, and I was surrounded by people who told stories about my accomplishments, my kindness, and my talents. For the first time in my life, I felt like the star of my own story. Sophie and her camera crew left around 8 o'clock, after it became clear that no one was paying attention to her engagement party setup. I heard later that she posted a passive-aggressive Instagram story about family drama and wedding crashers, but by then, I had stopped following her social media accounts. My parents left without saying goodbye. In the weeks that followed, I learned what it felt like to live without constantly managing other people's feelings about my choices. James and I went on our honeymoon to Italy, and I didn't check my phone once. When we returned, I had 17 voicemails from my mother, each one shifting between anger, guilt-tripping, and eventual desperation as she realized I wasn't going to call her back. The extended family members who had attended my wedding stayed in touch. Cousin Marie invited us to visit her in Michigan. Aunt Sarah started sending care packages to our new apartment. Uncle Jim offered to help James and me move to a bigger place when we were ready. For the first time in my adult life, I experienced what it felt like to have family relationships based on mutual respect rather than one-sided obligation. 3 months after the wedding, I made a decision that would have been unthinkable before. I started my own interior design firm. Without the constant drain of managing my family's expectations and Sophie's dramas, I had energy to pursue my own ambitions. Within 6 months, my business was thriving, and I had more clients than I could handle. James and I moved to a different city, partly for his job opportunity, and partly because I needed physical distance from the family dynamics that had defined my life for so long. We bought a beautiful house that I designed myself, and for the first time, I created a space that reflected my actual tastes, rather than what I thought other people wanted to see. The breakthrough came almost a year later, when Sophie's influence career imploded in a very public way. She had been caught staging fake drama for content, including fabricating a breakup with Derek and then pretending to get back together, all for views. Her sponsors dropped her, her follower count plummeted, and the wedding industry blog that had featured her engagement party later published an exposé about influencers who exploit family relationships for content. My parents, who had spent years treating Sophie's social media success as the family's claim to fame, suddenly found themselves associated with her scandal. Their country club friends were gossiping, their neighbors were asking awkward questions, and for the first time, they experienced what it felt like to be embarrassed by their favorite daughter. That's when my mother called. "Victoria, we need to talk." "I'm listening. Your father and I have been doing a lot of thinking since your wedding, and we realize we may have made some mistakes over the years. May have made some mistakes." Even in her apology, she couldn't fully acknowledge the extent of what they had done. "We were wrong to ask you to change your wedding date. We were wrong to prioritize Sophie's needs over yours so many times. We want to make things right." I took a deep breath, thinking about the past year of my life. The success of my business, the strength of my marriage, the genuine relationships I had built with family members who actually valued me. "Mom, I appreciate that you're saying this, but I need you to understand something. I don't need you to make things right anymore. I've already made them right for myself." "What does that mean?" "It means I spent 30 years waiting for you and Dad to see me, to value me, to treat me like I mattered as much as Sophie. And now I realize that I don't need your validation to live a good life. I have a husband who sees me, friends who celebrate me, and work that fulfills me. I'm not angry anymore, but I'm also not interested in going back to the way things were." The conversation ended with my mother crying and promising that things would be different. But I knew better than to believe that fundamental family dynamics could change overnight. 6 months later, when Sophie's latest attempt at rebuilding her brand failed, and she had to move back in with my parents, they called again. This time, they wanted to know if I could help Sophie find work in interior design, since my business was doing so well. I declined politely. "But she's your sister," my father protested. "Yes, she is, and if she wants to build a career in interior design, she can start the same way I did, with education, internships, and years of hard work building a reputation based on actual skill, rather than manufactured drama." Today, 3 years after my wedding, I'm sitting in my beautiful home office, looking out at the garden James and I planted together, with my phone turned off and my schedule full of clients who value my work. I have a business that allows me to create beauty for people who appreciate it, a marriage built on genuine partnership, and relationships with family members who actually want to know how I'm doing rather than what I can do for them. Sophie eventually found work as a sales associate at a furniture store, and from what Uncle Robert tells me, she's actually quite good at it when she's not trying to turn every customer interaction into content. My parents have settled into retirement and occasionally send awkward text messages trying to rebuild our relationship. But they still don't seem to understand that relationship requires consistent effort, not just crisis management. I've learned that family isn't defined by who shares your DNA or who was present at your childhood birthday parties. Family is the people who show up when it matters, who celebrate your successes without needing to compete with them, and who never ask you to make yourself smaller so they can feel more important. The wedding that I thought was going to be the worst day of my life became the day I finally learned to write my own story. And in this version, I'm not the supporting character in someone else's drama. I'm the hero of my own adventure. I used to think love meant sacrifice. I tell my clients sometimes when they're struggling to decide between what they want and what others expect from them. But real love, whether it's from family, friends, or partners, never asks you to sacrifice who you are. It asks you to become more yourself. And for the first time in my life, that's exactly what I've learned to do.